And if we're nervous or upset about anything, he's the perfect person to be there with you. They smiled on screen, they mended broken heirlooms, they brought families to tears with every restoration. But Suzie and Steve Fletcher, the beloved siblings of the repair shop, had a secret that spanned decades. While audiences admired their skill, few imagined the silent battles they faced beyond the barn doors. But now the repair shop, Suzie and Steve Fletcher, finally open up, and fans are stunned. We are about to unfold their untold story, a journey through childhood pain, lifelong silence, and a final decision to break it all open. The calm before the reveal. Before the reveal, a decade, millions of viewers around the world found solace in the gentle rhythm of the repair shop, the soft scrape of sandpaper against weathered wood, the reassuring tick of a freshly serviced clock, and the bittersweet tears of families reunited with lost heirlooms, all combined to create a sanctuary of warmth and tradition. Central to this comforting atmosphere were Suzie and Steve Fletcher, siblings whose hands seemed touched by a rare kind of magic. Suzie, with her delicate touch and serene demeanor, embodied the timeless qualities of patience and care. Steve, meticulous and quiet, balanced her energy with a steady calm. Together they were the beating heart of the workshop, anchors in a sea of nostalgia and restoration. To the public, they were not just skilled artisans, they were family symbols of enduring strength, steadfast loyalty, and the deep roots of heritage. Their shared laughter, their subtle glances, the way they complemented each other's strengths, it was a dance of kinship, almost perfect in its harmony. Yet behind those warm smiles and gentle hands lay a story carefully tucked away, a story stitched with pain, resilience, and secrets kept from the cameras, a truth neither framed by the workshop's vintage walls nor revealed through the glint of polished silver. The fans sensed something beneath the surface, a flicker of sadness in Suzie's eyes when a piece reminded her of lost moments, a brief hesitation in Steve's steady hands when the conversation drifted too close to home. These nuances whispered of a hidden chapter, but no one could have guessed how deep the shadows ran. Shadows beneath the workshop. Suzie Fletcher's life was more than the graceful exterior portrayed on screen. Behind her poised smile was a past etched with quiet endurance, raised amidst the rugged beauty of Colorado's sprawling ranchlands. Suzie grew up learning the meaning of hard work, responsibility, and silent sacrifice. The landscape shaped her, vast, untamed, and occasionally unforgiving. Her marriage once promised happiness, but it became a chapter marked by hardship. The man she loved became a source of pain she rarely spoke about, even to those closest to her, a union shadowed by control, bruises hidden beneath the fabric of everyday life, and moments where fear replaced love despite the weight she bore. Suzie's resolve never faltered. She transformed pain into purpose, channeling her strength into every piece she restored, every story she helped preserve. Yet beneath the surface, scars lingered, invisible to the audience but known intimately by her. Steve Fletcher, her brother and co-star, was the quiet guardian of their shared history. His world revolved around the intricate gears and delicate springs of antique watches and clocks, his craft an outward expression of the precision he craved in life. But beneath the rhythmic ticking of timepieces was a man guarding his own emotional wounds. Steve's calm was a mask behind the scenes. He carried the burden of protecting his sister, managing family tensions, and maintaining the workshop as a haven for both their souls. His steady hands did more than repair objects, they mended fragile hearts, including his own. Together, Suzie and Steve presented a united front to the world. Their camaraderie, sometimes playful, sometimes solemn, was born of shared survival. Fans believed they glimpsed the full picture through their interactions and interviews, but they hadn't even scratched the surface. What lay beneath was a story that would soon come to light, one that would challenge the comforting narrative and reveal the true strength behind the Fletcher siblings, the house that tried to heal a world of contrasts. Their childhood home in Oxfordshire was a world of contrasts. On the surface it was a ramshackle, time-worn house with creaky wooden floors and faded wallpaper that whispered stories of generations past. Four siblings filled its rooms with noise, chaos, and laughter, chasing each other through narrow hallways, their busy hands always crafting something or mending something. It was a place that held the warmth of family meals, birthdays marked by homemade cakes, and the scent of freshly brewed tea wafting from the kitchen to outsiders. It was a picture of a close-knit, loving family, but beneath the smiles and the noise lay an undercurrent of unspoken pain and fragility. Their mother struggled in silence with severe postnatal depression, a condition poorly understood at the time, often dismissed or hidden behind closed doors. The joyful cacophony of childhood masked a persistent darkness that loomed over the household. Their mother's world was often shrouded in deep sadness and anxiety, her energy ebbing away like a tide pulling out to sea, their father tasked with holding the family together. Break down the kind that shatters facades and exposes raw vulnerability. There were times when the children were quietly shuffled off to relatives' homes, their innocence preserved in safe pockets away from the storm. Days were spent navigating a family life where warmth sometimes felt like a carefully maintained mask, a fragile veneer concealing the emotional fractures beneath. Steve Fletcher later reflected on those early years with both candor and compassion. Our mom suffered dreadfully from post-natal depression. He recalled, voice heavy with the weight of memory. It wasn't just sadness, it was a profound isolation, and that pushed Dad over the edge. He just couldn't cope and had a nervous breakdown. It was a dark time for all of us. Suzie, her voice tinged with empathy, added, looking back, I feel incredibly sorry for Mom. Back then nobody really realized how terrible it was. The care they provided was, at best, crude, the kind of things that would be considered barbarous today, and she was stuck in a system that didn't know how to help her. Despite the hardship, the siblings' memories of their parents are balanced by both affection and unwavering honesty. Steve admitted quietly that we had our problems like most families, but we also had each other, and somehow, we got through those times. This resilience wasn't just luck, but rather the quiet strength of a family determined to heal in its own imperfect way. The absent years. As she entered her 30s, Suzie made a decision that would change the course of her life. She crossed the Atlantic to start a new life in Colorado, USA. It was a daring leap, an exciting adventure, and a chance to forge a new identity far from the shadows of a difficult past. But beneath the promise of new beginnings there was an element of escape. The move was as much about fleeing old ghosts as it was about embracing new opportunities. Colorado's vast landscapes and open skies offered Suzie space to breathe, a reprieve from the closeted struggles of her youth. In America she found love, or so it seemed at first. Rob, the man she married, became a central but silent figure in her story. To the many fans who followed her on the repair shop, he remained an enigma, an absence on screen that spoke volumes in its silence. The marriage was never openly discussed. What happened behind closed doors was a chapter marked by pain and endurance, a hidden battle that shaped Suzie into the strong, compassionate woman viewers would come to admire. The trauma she endured in that relationship was profound, but it was the quiet resilience and refusal to be defined by suffering that became her true legacy. Though rarely spoken, the shadows cast by those years lingered, shaping her worldview, her empathy, and her commitment to healing through the craft and connections she later fostered. On the show, her journey from those difficult hidden years toward public life and creative fulfillment is a testament to the unyielding human spirit, showing how even in the darkest chapters hope and transformation remain possible. But what about her brother back in the UK? The silence was strategic. Steve, the silence was strategic. Fletcher's life unfolded largely within the quiet bounds of Oxfordshire, far from the public eye's relentless glare. Though the world saw the cheerful face of the horologist on the repair shop, few understood the weight he carried beneath that calm exterior. Steve was a man of precision, not just with clocks and watches but with the boundaries he drew around his private life. Raising 5 children in a close-knit family, Steve carefully cultivated a reputation as a master craftsman whose hands could breathe life back into the most battered heirlooms. Yet amidst all this visible success, an unspoken agreement held the family together, an agreement forged in silence. Behind every laugh caught on camera was a carefully constructed shield protecting the family from the raw truth that could fracture their world. Suzie Fletcher, equally skilled and revered for her leather work and saddle restoration, shared this unspoken pact. She understood perhaps better than anyone the cost of exposure. We were forced to hide this, she admitted quietly in a rare interview, because families didn't share. Not back then. It wasn't safe to talk about these things. That silence was no accident, it was survival in a generation where mental health was taboo, where vulnerability was often mistaken for weakness. The Fletchers built their fortress not with bricks or mortar but with reticence and discretion. Suzie's words echoed the unspoken truth that many families of their time lived. Grief and trauma were kept locked away, safe from prying eyes, to protect not just the individuals but the family as a whole. Steve's refusal to leave Oxfordshire to escape the shadows of past hardships by relocating or changing course was itself a quiet testament to endurance. His steadfastness was a mirror of resilience, not a man running from pain but one learning to carry it without breaking the cameras. could never capture the countless hours of silent struggle behind the workshop's doors, moments when hands that fixed old clocks trembled with memories better left untouched, smiles shown to the world concealed the night spent wrestling with sorrow and the relentless burden of protecting a family legacy scarred by loss. And so in the hush between ticks of the clock, Steve and Suzie's silence spoke volumes. It was a language learned and shared in whispered glances and knowing nods, an unbreakable bond forged in the depths of shared pain and fierce love. Cracks in the veneer, but time, like even cracks in the veneer, the most finely tuned mechanisms, reveals imperfections. The veneer of composure and cheerfulness that Steve and Suzie meticulously maintained began to show subtle cracks visible only to those paying close attention. Suzie's noticeable absences from several repair shop episodes didn't go unnoticed by devoted fans. Whispers of concern grew louder, though the reasons remained unspoken. Her once lively and bright presence felt dimmed, as if shadows from the past were quietly creeping into the present. Steve too grew more reserved. Interviews became tinged with reflection. The man who once seemed unshakable revealing fleeting glimpses of a deeper story on podcasts and behind-scenes features, hints of memories buried beneath layers of time. Surface stories told in fragments, carefully chosen words that raised more questions than answers. Fans drawn by the authenticity of the Fletcher's craft and warmth found themselves grappling with the enigma of what lay behind those smiles. The family's collective silence began to feel less like a barrier and more like a plea for understanding, for patience, and for respect of the battles fought in private. What had they endured to become this close? What tragedies and hardships had woven such a tightly knit bond? What truths had they consciously withheld, hidden behind a curtain of resilience and grace? The growing cracks in their public image invited curiosity but also empathy. The Fletcher family's story was no longer just one of restoration and craftsmanship. It was a human story of survival, endurance, and the quiet heroism of protecting one another through the darkest of times. As the public gaze sharpened, the anticipation mounted. The reveal, when it finally came, would not just be about what was lost or hidden. It would be about the strength found in embracing vulnerability and the courage it takes to finally speak what once could only be whispered. The decision to speak. This was pain doesn't always wear a mask, not a sudden reveal. It was a slow unraveling, a decades-long internal negotiation that finally reached its tipping point. For years, Steve and Suzie carried their shared history with a silent dignity, a quiet resilience that rarely revealed the storm beneath the surface. They lived their lives in the spotlight of public admiration, especially on the repair shop, yet behind the scenes a delicate wall of silence stood firm, not out of shame but necessity. The world saw their smiles, their ease in front of the cameras, and their seemingly effortless passion for restoration, but they knew the truth was more complicated. Pain doesn't always wear a clear mask. Sometimes it lurks behind calm eyes and soft-spoken words. Then came the moment when the scales finally tipped. It wasn't a grand announcement or a tabloid expose. It was a podcast interview, intimate, unvarnished, and profoundly human. A few carefully chosen words slipped into the ether, almost hesitant at first, as if testing the waters. The reaction was immediate, but the intention was clear. They were done hiding. Steve spoke first, his voice steady yet laced with the weight of years spent containing the past. When you grow up with that kind of background, you just carry it quietly, he said, his tone more reflective than resentful. But eventually you have to let some of it go. You can't keep carrying everything inside forever. It eats at you. It wasn't a plea for sympathy or a bid for attention. It was a release, a reckoning. The siblings had chosen vulnerability over invisibility. Behind their calm, a revolution had begun, a quiet but unstoppable movement toward truth, healing, and reclamation of self. The hidden chapter. Yet even with the hidden chapter, that breakthrough, much remained in shadow. What they revealed was only the surface of a much deeper, darker story that had long been buried beneath the smiles and the craftsman's patience. In a rare extended interview, Suzie and Steve peeled back the layers of the past, the ones they had long protected with fierce loyalty and fear. This was not just a tale of grief or hardship. This was survival, raw, unfiltered, and painfully real. Suzie's marriage, which the public had only seen in fleeting glimpses, concealed a harrowing journey. Rob, her husband, was a man who had battled pancreatic cancer with a warrior's spirit, but the illness brought more than physical decline. It revealed a terrifying transformation of character. What began as subtle changes became unmistakable signs of control and violence. The darkest memory she shared was that of being lifted off the ground by her throat, her feet dangling as breath rapidly fled her body. "I honestly thought I was going to die," Suzie confessed, voice barely above a whisper. "He was choking me, squeezing so hard I thought my airway would close completely. I don't know what stopped him, why he let go, but when he did, I was left gasping, terrified." Her admission hung heavy in the air, a silence that spoke louder than Words it shattered illusions not just for the audience but for Suzie herself. I was profoundly shocked, she reflected, eyes distant. I'd always believed it could never happen to me, that kind of violence, that kind of fear. It was for other people, other stories, not mine. He would never hurt me. At least that's what I told myself until I saw the truth, until I felt his hands around my throat. The transformation of Rob from a loving partner to someone unpredictable and dangerous was a cruel twist of fate that only deepened the wound Suzie carried. Yet amidst the pain her words carried a quiet strength, an unspoken promise to reclaim her life. This hidden chapter was the most difficult to share, but it was necessary, because silence, as they now understood, was a form of captivity. Speaking was freedom, what the fans never knew. For the real story, years, millions tuned in to watch Suzie and Steve Fletcher work their magic. The cameras captured the meticulous care, the delicate hands bringing history back to life. They saw the polished leather, the gleaming metal, the intricate stitching, but what they didn't see was the quiet resilience beneath it all. The real story wasn't only in the objects but in the people who restored them behind the scenes. Suzie and Steve were survivors in every sense. They carried invisible scars from childhood hardships, from years shadowed by silence and unspoken pain, the laughter shared over a restored clock face, masked nights spent wrestling with memories that refused to fade, the precise, patient craft of mending worn-out saddles mirrored the painstaking work they had to do on their own fractured pasts. Each heirloom, each antique wasn't just a project, it was a symbol, a mirror of their own journeys. They understood the weight of something broken and the hope wrapped up in its repair. For them, restoration transcended skill. It became a language of healing, a silent but powerful act of reclaiming control over what once felt lost. Steve once said in a rare moment of candor, "We didn't just fix things for others, it became part of our own healing. Bit by bit, as we restored these treasures, we found pieces of ourselves." Suzie, whose gentle demeanor belied a lifetime of hardship, nodded in agreement. "Every stitch I made wasn't just about the leather, it was about putting myself back together, about telling a story I wasn't ready to speak aloud." The show's success had painted them as expert restorers, but it never fully captured the depth of their personal battles. They had been forced to the impact hide their pain, to mask their struggles beneath professionalism and smiles, even as the weight of their histories threatened to overwhelm them. Public life demanded a constant performance, a relentless polish that often felt at odds with their internal truths. Yet through it all, their bond, their unbreakable sibling connection, was a lifeline. It was in late-night conversations, in silent understanding, and in the shared commitment to keep moving forward despite the past. Together they weren't just repairing antiques, they were quietly repairing themselves. When Suzie and Steve Fletcher finally opened the door to their private world, the impact was profound. Viewers who had only seen the skilled hands and calm voices suddenly glimpsed the raw, unfiltered humanity behind the restoration benches. They spoke of abuse that had haunted childhood years, shadows that stretched far longer than anyone could have guessed, of mental health battles fought in silence, battles they waged even while being in the public eye, of generational trauma that wrapped around them like a suffocating cloak, inherited from those before them and threatening to pass on yet again. But even amid this darkness they chose kindness. They chose to keep restoring not just objects but the spirit of hope and resilience. Their work became a beacon, a testament to the possibility of healing after pain, of rebuilding what once seemed impossible to save. Suzie's revelation was the heart of it all, a truth kept secret for decades, finally shared with unflinching honesty. It was not just a story of survival, it was a call to courage, to breaking silence, and to embracing imperfection as strength. This wasn't just another episode in a beloved series. It was a reckoning, a moment where the veneer of polished restoration gave way to the truth beneath fragile beautiful. Suzie and Steve Fletcher taught their audience an unforgettable lesson: healing can be an act of creation, and sometimes the greatest restoration is the one we do to ourselves. What is one truth you've kept hidden for too long, and what would it take to finally let it out? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video with us, and we hope to see you in the next one. For the first time, they weren't just preserving history for others, they were reclaiming their own story piece by piece, stitch by stitch.